Hey guys, Alex here from the DM's Club on the Titan Bear Gaming YouTube channel. Today I'm bringing you a special video in honor of Star Wars Episode VIII, The Last Jedi, out in theaters right now. I just got back from seeing it and so I'm on something of a Star Wars kick, but the thought occurred to me, what happens if you'd like to put the Force and Jedi in your Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition game? So I took a stab at it and figured that I would share what I came up with here with you guys. Now I think it's actually fairly easy to justify the presence of the Force within a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition rule set and universe. Magic, as it's described in the player handbook, is already a ubiquitous presence. It's already this field that overlays across the entire universe that casters pluck at the strings of magic to cast things, and it's already this vastly penetrating force that binds the universe together. So why not have the actual force be in there as well? Just lay it in there on top of the regular magic. Now, there's a bunch of ways that we could do this. We could go the cleric route, make it a full domain, being a cleric of the Force or something like that. But I actually want to go with the Warlock. I think the Warlock lends itself very well to more of a blade-oriented character, so you can get your lightsaber in there, as well as having some kind of otherworldly powers or powers that originate from within, from yourself, that I think matches nicely to the Jedi concept. And instead of making it a different class, I'm just going to make it an archetype from the Warlock and give them a special patron for it as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Warlock. This will be an archetype for the Warlock as well as a new patron for the Warlock. So let's go ahead and walk through the Warlock class abilities. It starts on page 106 of the player handbook, and we can see what we have. So we'll go ahead and start with the hit dice. I like 1d8 from the Warlock. I think that's fitting for a Jedi. You wouldn't necessarily want them to be as squishy as a 1d6, nor as tanky as a 1d10, so 1d8 is a nice middle ground for a hybrid character like a Jedi would be. From a proficiencies point of view, light armor is a reasonable starting proficiency, and simple weapons is okay, mostly because we're going to be bringing in a special Warlock pact for the Pact of the Blade. It's going to be a modified version of the Pact of the Blade, which will help cover any other proficiencies we might need to wield our lightsaber or whatever equivalent weapon we're going to use. From a saving throws perspective, we have proficiencies in wisdom and charisma. Both sound fine. I like the charisma. I like the piece of charisma here that is the life force part of charisma, as it's been described in previous editions of the game. Not strictly a matter of your ability to be a silver-tongued devil. Also a measurement of your force of personality or your attunement to magic or to the life aspect of the world around you. I also don't care too much about the starting equipment that you have listed here. We can go ahead and keep that. Like I said, when we get to our Pact of the Blade, we'll be making our own weapon anyway, so I think it's going to fit regardless. At first level, you pick up your otherworldly patron. Now, for the patron here, I'm going to come up with a completely new patron. This is going to be the Ancient Jedi Master patron. I'm thinking you have a Jedi Master like a Yoda that can come to you in visions. He comes to you and speaks to you in Jedi spirit form and gives you tutelage, gives you instruction in the ways of the Force. Just like the other patrons, they'll give you spells that you'll have access to, as well as powers at various levels. We'll get there when we get to that section here in the book. So first up is Pact Magic. I'm basically going to use Pact Magic almost as is here from the Warlock class. We'll start with the cantrips. You do begin the game with 2 cantrips from the Warlock spell list, and you'll grow to up to 4 cantrips by the end of the game. Most of the cantrips that are available for the Warlock class are already pretty thematically appropriate for Jedi. I would ditch the Chill Touch and the Poison Spray, but otherwise Mage Hand is a great one, Friends is a great one, Blade Ward is fine, True Strike is fine. I'd also probably get rid of Prestidigitation as well. That doesn't really necessarily make sense, but the rest of them are all perfectly fitting and perfectly reasonable for a thematic Jedi. I'll also keep the spell slots the same. There's no reason to change that. I like that since Warlocks are already kind of a different spellcaster anyway, they always cast at their highest spell slot available and they just recover them per short rest. I feel like that actually maps reasonably well to a Jedi's power list anyway. We're going to be picking spells that are very similar to Jedi powers, so you'll be able to throw those suckers out as many times as you want, just taking a short rest in between each fight. Spells Known is actually the first piece that I'm going to make a major change for. I'm just going to go ahead and rip all the Spells Known away from the Jedi Warlock. I don't think that we're really going to be channeling the Spellcaster Jedi. I think that it's a little bit easier and a little bit more thematically streamlined to go with more of the Saber Fighter who has Force powers. It keeps you a little bit better to the movies, at least to the main characters for the movies, and I think it's probably what people are going to be mostly interested in playing. Now, like I said, from your Pact Magic, when you pick your Ancient Jedi Master patron, they'll give you some spells, and that's what'll make use of these spell slots that you'll have access to, but otherwise you don't need to be picking Warlock magic or anything else along those lines. Instead of having the normal spellcasting for magic for a Warlock, the Jedi Warlock, instead I'm going to give you 2 things. I'm going to say let's go for a fighting style that we pick up from the fighter class, The only one that doesn't really fit is Protector, because that one involves a shield, and we don't really have any precedent for a shield within a Jedi universe. But all the rest of them, two-handed is fine if you want to go two-handed lightsaber or a two-handed, force pole arm or something along those lines. That would work perfectly well. Dual weapon fighting is also fine. Dueling, armor class, it's all good. It all I think fits and can be reasonably justified for a Jedi-themed character. So go ahead and pick a fighting style. I think that one will work out well. And we'll do it the same way here as our Pact Magic. You pick it up at first level. Sure, why not? And then we'll also go ahead and throw in Deflect Missiles from the Monk class. Now, to remind you, Deflect Missiles basically makes it so that when you take ranged damage, you can make a roll of, I believe, a 1d10, and you add your Monk level and your Dexterity modifier to attempt to reduce the damage from the shot. Let's change Dexterity modifier to Charisma, since Warlocks are Charisma casters to begin with. And we'll keep focusing on the charisma aspect for this, and obviously change your monk level to your warlock level so that you have the ability as a reaction whenever you are taking a ranged shot to try and deflect it. Nice and thematic for the Star Wars movies. We can give that also at level 1 just to help give that extra punch of what your Jedi feels like at the very beginning of the game. Like I said, we'll keep the spellcasting ability at charisma, so all the math is perfectly fine just to use as is for the warlock. And from a spellcasting focus perspective, by the time that we reach level 3, we're going to go ahead and replace your spellcasting focus with your Jedi Weapon anyway, so it's kind of irrelevant. So at second level, you pick up Eldritch Invocations, which is the whole list of different kinds of weird powers that Warlocks get from being a Warlock. If you go through them and take a look at them, most of them already fit pretty nicely with a little bit of streamlining to fit within the Jedi thematic space. So I'm actually going to go ahead and say, let's just use those invocations as is. I would avoid anything that has an elemental thematic to it, because we don't really have a precedent for that in the Jedi universe. But otherwise, most of the rest of it works out pretty well. It's all very Pact of the Blade focused, or it's a matter of detecting thoughts or disguise, or, convincing people of believing things that aren't necessarily true, levitation, stuff like this. It all fits pretty reasonably well as is. So we'll go ahead and keep that, just avoiding the elemental style ones. So at third level, you pick up Pact Boon. I'm going to go ahead and say that you have to take Pact of the Blade, and we'll make it a modified version of Pact of the Blade. Now, the normal version for Pact of the Blade is that you can create your Pact weapon of any type, and it grants you proficiency in that weapon type. And you can use it. The weapon disappears if it's greater than 5 feet from you. Other things like this. I'm going to go ahead and take a holdover from the Eldritch Knight class, the Eldritch Knight archetype for fighter, and bring it into here, which is to basically say that you're going to go ahead and spend your ritual to create your Jedi weapon, and this can be your lightsaber. You can either do it as a long sword, or if you want to go 2 sabers, 2 little ones, or a two-handed thing or something, I would be perfectly okay with that. Some dungeon masters may want to be a little more purist about it, but I would be okay with it. Make your weapon as the ritual, and then we'll give you the power that as a bonus action, you can force grab the weapon back into your hand if it ever gets disarmed from you, or if it's ever taken from you. Now, to really channel the lightsaber element of this, we can just borrow the Adamantine property that we find elsewhere within the 5th edition rule set. Now, fortunately, Adamantine has been simplified a little bit for 5th edition relative to prior editions. Adamantine basically says that it is a super hard weapon that really only matters when you're trying to break things with that weapon. When you try to break an object or another weapon or armor or something using an adamantine object, like a sword, like a lightsaber in this case, this version of our lightsaber, what happens is your damage is automatically a critical hit whenever you're trying to break some kind of object, which I think will work okay if you're trying to cut through stuff or whatever else. I think that actually works out reasonably well. It also has the added bonus that the monetary equivalent for making something an adamantine weapon is supposed to be like 300 gold pieces or 500 gold pieces more expensive than normal. And so getting this at level 3 already gives you kind of that passive benefit of having this expensive item in your possession. We'll take something from the Hexblade Pact Warlock from Xanathar's Guide to Everything, and we'll go ahead and make it so that you don't have to use Dex or Strength to be your attacking stat. You can go ahead and use your Charisma instead, so that helps keep you as a nice single stat class as a Warlock Jedi. And we'll go ahead and let all of the usual Eldritch Invocations that apply to a Pact of the Blade Warlock apply here. These are things like being able to knock people down, especially for the new invocations over in Xanathar's Guide. You get things like knocking people down or forcing people to make certain kinds of saves boost to take from other effects, or being able to add a +1 or a +2 to the magical properties for the weapon. You can use this to help justify being able to power up your weapon as your character's leveling up. So we'll go ahead and make sure that those things can all apply as would be the normal situation for a Pact of the Blade. And just to be clear, we won't let the Jedi Warlock take any of the other pacts, just because at this point it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to, and so we'll go ahead and put that restriction in there. Your ability score improvements are fine as is. I don't see a reason to change those. The next power that you get is your Mystic Arcanum at 11th level, which I actually like this one a fair bit. Mystic Arcanum operates a little bit differently than most other spellcasters do, just by the regular 5th edition rules here in the player handbook, that your Warlock would pick spells at certain levels to be their Arcanum spell, and this is how you get access to the higher level spell slots as a Warlock. The way that it basically works is you pick a 6th level spell at 11th level, you pick a 7th level spell at 13th level, an 8th level spell at 15th level, and a 9th level spell at 17th level, and you get to cast these once per day without having to spend a spell slot to do so. Let's go ahead and leave this power in directly as is. I like this because the kinds of powers that you get access to at your 6th level, 7th level, 8th level, and 9th level are some really potent stuff, and so I like this from the thematic point of view of being able to make up some new force powers. By the time that your character is reaching that level, you're going to be a pretty powerful Jedi as far as your adventuring world is concerned, and so you should be able to start plumbing some new stuff, some new powers that you can channel the force to make some kind of wild stuff happen. So I say work with your DM and go ahead and figure out what kinds, go ahead and have access to that entire list of spells and see which ones make sense for you. What kinds of crazy powers can you manifest through your force connection? At 20th level, you pick up Eldritch Master, which is basically saying that you can spend 1 minute entreating your patron to regain all of your spell slots for your Pact Magic feature. Cool, we can go ahead and keep that one as is. I think that's fine. Taking a moment to have a powwow with your ancient Jedi Master and recover your force powers is cool. I think that works out. So let's talk about the otherworldly patrons. And this one I said we're going to make a new patron for our Jedi Warlock. And we're going to make this one the ancient Jedi Master. Now I said we'll have this one kind of, the individual will come talk to you as a spirit ghost or as a force ghost, and will give you your tutelage and help instruct you in the ways of the force. Now it's going to be fitted just like the rest of the different patrons are, where you get some additional spells, or in this case these are the spells that you have access to since we're gutting the spell list for the Warlock. But then you also get some additional powers at 1st, 6th, 10th, and 14th level, so we'll go ahead and define what those are. For your new spell list, I figure we'll start off at 1st level by giving you Jump and Command, so that way you can do your Jedi mind tricks and you can do some of the crazy acrobatics and some of the crazy athletics that you see Jedi doing in the movies. For 2nd level spells, we'll go ahead and put Hold Person on the list so we can get our Kylo Ren on and have some fun with that, as well as Detect Thoughts so we can start doing some mind reading. 2nd level, you start picking up some Kylo Ren style stuff, so that's pretty sweet. At 3rd level, the only spell that I'm declaring that we should go ahead and start with for this is Clairvoyance. I think that will help us channel our force sensitivity and our attunement to the life force of other living beings. But I'm going to go ahead and leave the extra 3rd level spot and the 4th level and 5th level spells up to the discretion of the user, because by the time you're getting to that point, you're going to be defining new powers for force users, new force powers. And I think that's a cool aspect that people, if you're looking to play a Jedi in a role-playing game, you're not just trying to play a tutorial or a walkthrough of a movie. You're trying to find some new stuff and kind of go out on a limb and coming up with some new force powers. So I think by leaving these deliberately open, you can talk to your dungeon master and figure out what makes the most sense for making new force powers in your game. I do recommend picking up Telekinesis as a 5th level spell, though. That's just too bread and butter for Jedi and force users in general. You really need to have that one, so be sure to put that one in there for 5th level. So let's go ahead and talk about the powers that you get from your patron. At 1st level, I think we should use the Draconic Resilience power from over in the Sorcerer spell, and we can go ahead and call that something different. You can call it Jedi Resilience or Light Side Training or something like this. But the power basically boils down to you get 1 additional HP per level every level, which effectively makes it so that your hit dice is slightly larger. I like that. I think it'll be beneficial for you being kind of a frontlines warrior style. I think that having the extra hit points will be beneficial and necessary. For our 6th level power, I think we'll go ahead and borrow the one Dark One's Own Luck from the Fiend patron. This one's cool. You can call upon your patron, in this case, your Jedi Master, to alter fate in your favor. When you make an ability check or a saving throw, you can use this feature to add a d10 to your roll. You can do so after seeing the initial roll, but before any of the roll's effects occur, and you can't use it again until you finish a short or a long rest. So you kind of have this like guidance of the Force or guidance from your master thing, which I kind of like. For 10th level, we'll borrow the Beguiling Defenses feature from the Archfey. This one is you get the resistance to mind affecting magical effects and things, which makes sense, especially if we're going into the Kylo Ren direction with some of our force powers. Being able to do this mind probe and resisting the mind probe is going to be a big thing for your character. The way that it works for this one is you are immune to being charmed, and when another creature attempts to charm you, you can use your reaction to attempt to turn the charm back on the creature. They must succeed on a wisdom save against your spell DC or be charmed by you. It's cool. It fits rather nicely within the general Star Wars universe, I think. At 14th level, I'm actually inclined to make up a new one. I'll borrow something similar from the Great Old One patron that already exists. At 1st level in the Great Old One, you get Awakened Mind, which gives you the ability to communicate telepathically with creatures that you can see. To amp this up to being a 14th level spell or ability, we'll call this Greater Awakened Mind, where you can communicate telepathically to creatures that you are familiar with, so long as they are on your plane of existence. I think that will actually go a long way. It doesn't really unbalance the character from a combat perspective, since it's just communication, but I think it could come in really handy by the time you're reaching 14th level. 14th level characters are all over the world. They're traversing different planes. They're trying to talk to friends and allies in different kingdoms. So I think it'll come in really handy. I think we can go ahead and put that one there. Plus, from a force thematic perspective, it helps to channel the idea that your force awareness and your sensitivity to the life forms that are out there within the universe is growing to an almost infinite degree. By the time you reach 14, I think that's about fair. And the last section that's listed here in the Warlock section is the Eldritch Invocations. And like I said before, they actually work out pretty well as is for trying to make a Jedi-themed character. It's why I picked the Warlock in the first place. You kind of already have the kind of advanced blade fighter who has magical power, unusual powers, not magic, unusual powers that have kind of weird effects. I feel like it fits pretty well already. So I say let's go ahead and use the Eldritch Invocations list as it exists, especially the extending it to include the one from Xanathar's guide as well. There's a lot of really relevant ones there for Pact of the Blade. And then just remember that we're requiring our Jedi Warlock to be a Pact of the Blade, so you can't take any of the Pact of the Chain or Pact of the Tome features. I would also avoid any of these that have any kind of elemental theme to them, just because we don't have much precedent for elemental stuff in the Jedi world, but the rest of them I think all work out pretty well. Some of the higher level stuff in here starts to get a little bit funky, like being able to do polymorph once as a warlock spell. But since it's a higher level stuff, it falls under the same statement that I made before of if you're playing a Jedi in a role-playing game, you're pretty much asking to have the ability to make new force powers, to come up with new things that you can use the force to make happen, to manifest, to kind of be that pioneer of new force powers. So I think it actually is pretty cool. Talk to your dungeon master, come up with kind of a thematic agreement for what kinds of things you might like to do, but otherwise I say just use this list as is. I think it's pretty easy. So I think that gives us a good start here for making a Jedi in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, as well as trying to channel the concept of the Force in 5th edition. Like I said, we're going to go ahead and leverage the Warlock class for this and make a new patron of a ancient Jedi Master, and then use a modified version of Pact of the Blade, but the rest of these powers all fit pretty well already as is. Let me know what you think of this idea. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know if you think you'll end up using this for your game, or if you guys are doing anything else to make Jedi and Star Wars and Force come up in your Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition game. Leave me a comment down below. I'd love to know what you have to say. Otherwise, you can come find me over on social media. I'm at Titan Bear Gaming, and I'd love to talk to you over there. Until next time I see you, have more fun, would ya? It's good for you.